If you can understand this about the book of Revelation, you're going to clear up so many different confusions about it. It's amazing. You have to know that the book of Revelation has areas that repeat the same time period with extra information that is not added to the timeline itself. It doesn't extend chronologically. It just goes back over the same time period. If you know that, you are going to understand the book of Revelation a whole lot better. So take a look at how this breaks down and grow with us. All right, we're going to talk about the structure of the judgments in the book of Revelation. The 14 chapters only in the middle that deal with the seals, the trumpets, and the vials of wrath. Starting with chapter 6, you can see right here on the far left, this is the root chapter right here. Chapter 6 is basically telling us the whole entire storyline from the beginning of sorrows, building into the Great Tribulation, and all the way until the return of Jesus on a horse down here. It says the return of the Lamb, the wrath of the Lamb is coming right here, and his wrath, he's bringing his wrath. The islands disappear. Every mountain and island were moved out of their places. This is the end in the sixth seal, when he opened the sixth seal right here. Now, people get confused because the seventh seal is told in the next 13 chapters. And the seventh seal is not necessarily telling a different timeline. It's all repeating the same timeline. In other words, everything in chapter 6 over here contains the 3.5 years or 7-year tribulation, if you like to look at it in 7 years. It contains the entire end all the way until the coming back of Jesus Christ. In fact, right down here at the bottom, this is where Christ defeats his enemies, and the next thing is really Revelation chapter 20, because that's where we see the millennial kingdom being set up for 1,000 years. After the wrath of the Lamb comes, and after the mountains and islands are disappeared, after the opening of the sixth seal. So you might ask yourself, what about the seventh seal? What we have over here on the right side is all the trumpets of tribulation and all the vials of wrath told in a long, drawn-out version, giving us great details about the Antichrist, the image of the beast, and all what happens during the trumpets, what happens during the wars, the starvation, all that stuff that's detailed in the seventh seal actually happens right over here inside this timeline. This is the timeline over here. The timeline is completed in chapter 6. The seventh seal, brothers and sisters, this is the timeline until Jesus' return. This is the Great Tribulation and the wrath of God. The Great Tribulation and the wrath of God are separated right here. Up here is the tribulation and stuff. Down here is the wrath of God in the sixth seal. Okay, now, over here in chapter 8, we start opening up the trumpets. When the eighth seal opens, when the seventh seal opens in chapter 8, we start to see the trumpets, first trumpet, second trumpet, third trumpet, fourth trumpet, fifth trumpet. And in all these chapters up here at the top are all the tribulation period. And it's told in the seventh seal. The seventh seal actually happens during the opening of the first 6 seals. So it's repeating the timeline. It's layering information back over top of chapter 6. Now, if you can understand that, it'll help you. So what we have here is the main chapter is chapter 6. Then we have chapters 8 to 14, where we have 2 repeating timeline. It repeats the timeline in this area twice. In other words, we get to read about the tribulation period 2 times, just like we read about the end times here, this 3.5 or 7 year period, if you like to call it 7 years. this is repeated over here in the seventh seal. And the seventh seal contains the trumpets and the vials. So these trumpets and vials are actually contained over here in that chapter, chapter 6. But let's take a look at this. We're talking about the tribulation period and the trumpets right now, the trumpets. Inside the trumpets, we've got a repeating of time as well. Chapters 8 to 11 are the trumpets. Chapters 12, 13, and 14 are going back over that same 3.5-year period, or 7-year period if you like, and it repeats. These repeat. Okay, these 3 chapters repeat the same time period as these 4 chapters right here. Okay, and then when it's done in chapter 14, the reapers are sent into the earth. The reapers are sent to gather the righteous and the wicked, and it's the end again. Well, what about the wrath of God over here? The wrath in the vials, right? Well, what happens is, after the resurrection and rapture takes place, when he comes back, after the suffering of Christians in seal 5 right here, the greatest persecution of Christians, then the resurrection and rapture can take place before the wrath down here is poured out. Here's the wrath over here in the far right. So between this area here, the tribulation period, and this area over here, the wrath, where we see the fall of Babylon, the vials being poured out, and Christ returns in chapter 19, right down here on a white horse, the same as the lamb coming down right over here in chapter 6. It's a repeating of time, right? Over here in tribulation period, in the 7th trumpet, in the 7th trumpet blows, we have the resurrection rapture event, which happens over here at the end of seal 5, just before the 6th seal is opened and the wrath is poured out. So it's all mixed around. I hope you guys are getting this, because what I'm trying to get you to understand, guys, is that chapter 6 is the first telling of Christ's return. He comes back in the 6th seal to pour out the wrath after the resurrection and rapture, and he comes back right here, and it's over. Chapters 7 is who's going to go through it, but chapters 8 all the way to chapter 19 is what we're talking about in this area over here. And that is basically the same timeline as chapter 6, but it's slowly telling us more information about what happens. So seal 7 over here, let's take a look at this. Seal 7 happens right over here. In all these chapters over here is seal 7. Let's take a look at this. All 13 of these chapters is seal 7. All of this takes 3.5 years, or 7 if you'd like to use 7. That's seal 7. 1 through 6, seals 1 through 6 is the same time period, or same timeline. It's not extra time. It's a very brief summation of Christ's return in all the catastrophes that'll take place without a lot of details. It doesn't talk about the Antichrist. It doesn't talk about the mark of the beast. It doesn't talk about the stinging scorpion creatures. We get all that information when seal 7 is opened up. So God is going to complete the story. That's what 7 is a number of. 7 is the number of completion, and the story of the end times, or the prophecies and revelations about his coming back, is not complete until he gives us the details that are in seal 7. It's not about more time being added to the 6th seal, because when the 6th seal happens, there is no more time. This is the end of our time on earth. Christ comes back after the 6th seal to start the millennial kingdom. The 7th seal is another version of this story of him coming back, but he's going to give us the details that were left out of chapter 6. This is chapter 6 over here. This is chapters 8 to 19 right here. So what I'm trying to tell you is that this is 2 different versions. This is the first version, This is the second version, 13 chapters on the second version. The first version of Christ's return is a very short, brief, vague generalization in 6 seals. The 7th seal is the completion of his return. In other words, he's going to finish telling you more about what happens when he comes back. And then the 7 represents a complete prophecy, a complete message about his return. So we have 2 different, they're different, 2 different tellings of the return of Jesus Christ to the earth. Chapter 6 is one chapter all by itself, tells us about Christ coming back. And then chapters 8 to 19 tells us Christ is coming back, but it tells us what happens on the earth in great detail. Before he comes back, we get to see all the details. So what you have to understand is chapters 6 to 19 is the telling of what happens on the earth before Christ returns. It's 2 different tellings. One is general, over here, chapter 6, with 6 seals. One is a general overview. And chapters 8 to 19, we actually get to see the trumpets, the vials, the details, the stinging creatures, and all the stuff that's going to happen. And it all happens overlaid, all of this stuff on the left in seal 7, overlays in the timeline over here. It's not extra time. In other words, seal 7 does not happen way down here after Christ has already come back. Christ is coming back in seal 6. So we can't read about the Antichrist starting to rule for 42 months over here. How's the Antichrist going to rule for 42 months when Christ has already come back over here? It's not the way it works. So the way it works is that Jesus comes back over here to set up a kingdom down here after the 6th seal is open. And all the 7th seal is over here, all this is it's going to go back in time and tell us details about what to complete the story. It's not complete yet. Even though the completion of Christ's return is here, the details about what happens during that time period is not complete. So seal 7 is a completion of the rest of the story. That's what 7 means, completion, right? To be perfect and full. So the story over here in these 6 seals is not complete yet. We don't read about a whole lot of stuff that happens over here until the 7th seal is open, and then we get to see, oh wow, that all happened during that time. We didn't know about the Antichrist, and we didn't know about all those things until God decided to tell us in the 7th seal. You have to understand that the 7th seal is not extra time added after the 6th seal. It's only information that's added to what happens during the 6 seals. I hope that helps, guys. I love you. I'll see you in the next video. God bless you. Thanks. Peace.